Falling in love is one of the most beautiful experiences a human heart can endure. It makes you feel alive, seen, and deeply connected to someone in a way that touches your soul. But what happens when that love starts to hurt more than it heals? When staying becomes more painful than leaving? Yet the idea of letting go feels impossible. That's the quiet tragedy of emotional attachment. When your heart clings to someone who no longer holds space for you, and your soul starts aching for freedom even as it still remembers love. Emotional detachment isn't about bitterness or revenge. It's not about pretending you don't care. It's about realizing that love should never require you to lose yourself. It's about stepping away, not with hate in your heart, but with peace in your spirit. It's what happens when you begin to understand that holding on to someone who no longer reciprocates your energy is the very thing keeping you stuck, broken, and emotionally exhausted. And so, without fanfare, without dramatic goodbyes, you begin to let go. Slowly, quietly, gently. This process isn't easy. In fact, it might be one of the hardest things you'll ever do. Because emotional detachment doesn't always come with closure. It doesn't always come with answers or apologies. Sometimes, it begins in silence. Sometimes, it begins in small moments. The ones where you choose not to text first, not to overthink their words, not to wait by the phone. You begin to choose yourself in the tiniest of ways. And over time, those small acts of self-respect become powerful. As you detach, you'll feel both lost and found. You'll grieve the future you imagined and mourn the version of yourself who stayed too long. But then, something beautiful will begin to rise from the ashes. Clarity. You'll start to notice how much lighter you feel when they are not around, how your emotions feel more balanced, how your thoughts become more about you and less about them. You'll stop trying to fix things that were never yours to fix. You'll stop chasing love that always ran. And in that space, healing begins. You'll discover that detachment isn't the end of love. It's the beginning of self-love. It's the moment you realize that your peace is more important than their presence, and that the only person you truly need to come back to is you. If you're noticing these signs in your own life, it doesn't mean you've failed. It means you're growing. It means you're waking up. And most of all, it means you're learning how to love yourself in a way no one else ever could. 1. You stop feeling excited when they call or message. There comes a moment in emotional detachment when something as simple as a message or call from the person you once loved no longer stays anything inside you. Where once your heart might have skipped a beat at the sound of their ringtone or the flash of their name on your screen, now there's a silence in your chest. Not because you hate them, but because something deep within has shifted. You've started letting go, not dramatically, not with loud declarations, but quietly, internally, like the slow turning of a page you no longer feel the need to reread. This lack of excitement doesn't happen overnight. It creeps in gradually. At first, you may not even notice it. You might see the notification and tell yourself you're just busy, just tired, that you'll reply later. But later becomes maybe tomorrow, and tomorrow becomes maybe not at all. It's not about being cold. It's about emotional preservation. The same way the body stops reacting to something it no longer finds nourishing, the heart stops leaping for someone who no longer gives it life. You may even feel guilty about it. You might wonder if you're being unfair or unkind. But detachment isn't cruelty, it's clarity. It's the understanding that not every connection is meant to last forever, and not every person deserves to hold space in your emotional world forever. And so, where there was once urgency and craving, now there is stillness. You don't check your phone constantly anymore. You don't read into their emojis or overanalyze their words. You simply see it as a message, nothing more, nothing less. It's one of the most telling signs that your heart is beginning to reclaim its space. You're not building walls, you're growing roots elsewhere. And in that quiet space, you begin to realize something profound, that you are healing even if it doesn't feel like it. Because when love no longer excites you, it's often because your soul has started to understand its worth. 2. You no longer seek their validation or approval. There comes a point in the process of emotional detachment when you realize you've stopped looking for their validation. You don't wait for them to notice your effort, to praise your progress, or to approve of your choices. Where once their opinion had the power to lift or shatter you, now it simply feels like background noise, something you might hear, but no longer take to heart. You begin to understand that the approval you need most is your own. This shift doesn't mean you suddenly stop caring overnight. It's subtle, almost invisible at first. You might catch yourself making a decision without wondering how they'd react. You wear what you like, say what you mean, post what you feel without the lingering thought of, will they notice? Will they like it? And that realization is both painful and liberating. Painful, because it shows you just how deeply you used to tie your worth to their words. Liberating, because it means you're finally breaking that chain. When you no longer seek their validation, you begin to see yourself more clearly. You no longer mold your personality to fit their preferences or silence your voice to keep their peace. You don't need their reassurance to feel beautiful, capable, or enough. You start trusting your own instincts, your own reflections in the mirror, your own inner compass. Their silence doesn't sting as much anymore, because you no longer treat it as a verdict. The truth is, emotional detachment often looks like quiet confidence. It's a moment you stop trying to be seen, and instead, start seeing yourself. You stop performing. You stop proving. You stop pleading for acknowledgement. And in doing so, you start becoming whole again. Not because they finally gave you what you needed, but because you finally stopped needing it from them. That's the beauty of growth. It teaches you to fill your own cup. Their voice may have once been loud in your head, but now, it's your own voice that matters more. 3. You start prioritizing your own needs over theirs. One of the clearest signs that you're emotionally detaching from someone you love is when you begin to prioritize your own needs over theirs, not out of selfishness, but out of self-respect. It's a quiet but powerful shift. You no longer automatically put them first in every situation. You stop sacrificing your peace to maintain theirs. You begin to recognize that your needs, dreams, and well-being deserve just as much attention and care as theirs ever did. In the past, you may have constantly bent your schedule, your values, even your identity to accommodate them. You may have gone out of your way to make them happy, even when it left you emotionally drained. But now, something inside you has changed. You start saying no without guilt. You set boundaries, even if it means disappointing them. You no longer stretch yourself thin just to earn a sliver of closeness. Because deep down, you've learned that love should never come at the cost of your own stability. This kind of shift can feel strange at first. You may question yourself, wonder if you're being distant or cold. But soon, you'll realize that it's not coldness, it's balance. You're finally putting your energy where it's needed, back into yourself. You make choices that support your growth instead of theirs. You choose rest over conflict. You choose truth over pleasing. You choose peace over temporary affection. When you start prioritizing your own needs, you stop waiting for them to fulfill you. You begin to take back the power you once gave away. You no longer beg for attention. You give it to yourself. You no longer tolerate emotional neglect. You walk away from it. This shift doesn't mean you don't care about them. It just means you started caring about yourself more. And that's not weakness, it's healing. Loving someone doesn't mean abandoning yourself. And detaching doesn't mean you stopped loving. It means you finally remembered how to love yourself, too. 4. You feel more peace when you're not around them. A powerful sign that you're emotionally detaching from someone you once deeply loved is the unexpected sense of peace you feel when you're not around them. Where once their presence brought comfort, safety, and a sense of belonging, now it feels like emotional noise, something that unsettles you more than it soothes. And when they are gone, when the calls stop and the visits fade, you don't feel empty. You feel calm. This peace is different from relief after an argument. It's a deeper kind of stillness. You begin to notice how quiet your mind becomes when they're not in your space. You no longer overthink every word, every look, every silence. You're no longer walking on emotional eggshells, trying to guess what mood they're in or how to keep the connection alive. You're not holding your breath anymore. You're breathing fully, maybe for the first time in a long while. At first, this might confuse you. You may wonder why their absence brings you more ease than their presence ever did. But that's where the truth reveals itself. Emotional detachment often begins in silence, in the soft spaces where you don't feel drained, triggered, or unseen. You realize how much emotional labor you are doing, how much of yourself you gave just to maintain the illusion of closeness. And now, without their weight on your heart, you begin to float again. This peace doesn't come with fanfare. It comes in the quiet moments, when you smile to yourself without needing their attention, when you sleep better without checking your phone, when you spend a day without missing their voice and feel lighter for it. You start seeing your own life clearly again, instead of through the lens of their moods, their needs, their chaos. And maybe that's the moment you realize you're healing. You didn't stop loving them all at once. You simply started loving your peace more. You're no longer addicted to their presence. You're anchored in your own. 5. You don't react emotionally to their actions like before. One of the most telling signs of emotional detachment is the calm you feel when they do something that used to unsettle you. You don't get angry when they cancel plans. You don't feel crushed when they forget something important. You don't overanalyze their words, wonder what they meant, or spiral into doubt when they act distant. Where there was once an emotional storm inside you, there's now stillness, like your heart has stopped depending on them to feel secure. This shift doesn't mean you become numb or that you no longer care at all. It means you've started to regain control over your own emotions. You recognize that their behavior isn't a reflection of your worth, it's just their behavior. You stop taking everything personally. You no longer make excuses for them, and you don't chase after answers that never come. Their silence doesn't provoke fear. Their mood swings don't set the tone for your day. At one time, even the smallest change in their tone could ruin your entire week. A vague message could send your mind into chaos. Their absence could create a void that felt unbearable. But now, things are different. You notice what they do, but you don't absorb it. You don't let it penetrate your sense of self. You might still feel a twinge of emotion, but it doesn't consume you. It passes like a cloud, not a storm. This emotional distance isn't cold, it's clarity. It's what happens when your heart starts protecting itself. You've been through enough. You've cried, hoped, begged, and overextended yourself so many times that now, when they repeat the same patterns, your response is silence. Not because you don't care, but because you've outgrown the cycle. You stop reacting, not because you're passive, but because your peace matters more than the drama. Their inconsistency no longer surprises you. Their affection no longer defines you. And slowly, without realizing it, you become someone who responds to life with wisdom instead of wounds. That's not detachment out of bitterness. It's detachment rooted in strength. 6. You stop imagining a future with them. One of the most painful yet liberating signs of emotional detachment is when you stop imagining a future with the person you once loved. The daydreams that used to fill your mind, the shared home, the wedding, the trips, the kids, the quiet mornings growing old together, begin to fade. Not because someone else has taken their place, but because your heart has begun to accept reality. The version of the future you once clung to now feels like a story that no longer fits who you are becoming. At first, this realization stings. It's like watching a movie you once loved and suddenly seeing all the flaws. You start to realize that the future you were holding on to was built more on hope than on truth. You begin to see that you were the one carrying the vision forward, while they remained still, or worse, pulled away. And now, when you think about what's ahead, they are no longer at the center. Maybe they're not there at all. This change doesn't happen in one moment. It unfolds quietly. You stop including them in your plans without noticing. You no longer bring up someday conversations. You stop fantasizing about what they'll look like standing beside you at big life moments. It's not bitterness, it's a gentle release. A quiet goodbye to a future that was only ever held together by your hope and effort. And strangely, that creates space. Space for new dreams. Space for yourself. You begin to imagine a future where your happiness doesn't depend on their presence. A life where your peace, success, and joy are not tied to someone who couldn't grow with you. You may still remember the old dreams, but they no longer haunt you. They simply become part of your past, not your purpose. Letting go of imagined futures is one of the hardest parts of detachment, because it feels like grieving something that never happened. But it's also one of the strongest things you'll ever do. It's how you take your heart back. It's how you stop waiting for someone to become who they promised and start becoming who you were always meant to be. 7. You no longer feel the urge to fix or chase the relationship. A clear and powerful sign of emotional detachment is when the constant urge to fix or chase the relationship fades away. Where once you might have fought with everything inside you to hold it together, sending long messages, apologizing even when it wasn't your fault, overcompensating for their distance, you now feel a strange calm in letting things be. You stop initiating every conversation. You stop trying to solve every problem. You stop begging for closeness, not out of defeat, but because your spirit is tired and ready to heal. It's not that you stopped loving them. It's that you finally started loving yourself more. You begin to recognize that relationships are not meant to be carried by one person. You understand that effort should be mutual and love should feel like partnership, not a one-sided pursuit. And slowly, you start choosing silence over repeated explanations, peace over arguments, and distance over desperate closeness. There may have been a time when every cold reply from them triggered panic, when every misunderstanding pushed you into overdrive, trying to make things right. But now, you don't chase after answers. You don't try to convince them to stay. You no longer search for the right words to be heard or the right actions to be seen. You simply allow things to unfold. And that is strength, not surrender. This shift doesn't make you bitter. In fact, it makes you wiser. You start seeing that real love doesn't need to be chased. If someone wants to be in your life, they will show up with effort, with consistency, with care. And you stop settling for less than that. You stop making excuses for their emotional absence. You stop shrinking your needs just to keep them comfortable. When you no longer feel the need to fix or chase the relationship, it means you've finally come home to yourself. You're learning that your worth isn't tied to someone's inability to love you well. And in that stillness, in that quiet release, you begin to find something far more powerful than attachment: your own peace. 8. You notice their flaws more clearly and accept them without trying to change them. A subtle but profound sign of emotional detachment is when you begin to notice their flaws more clearly. And, for the first time, you don't feel the need to fix, ignore, or fight them. In the early stages of love, it's easy to idealize someone, to see only their best parts, or to view their shortcomings as quirks you can live with or change over time. But as your heart begins to step back, clarity replaces infatuation. The fog lifts, and suddenly, you're seeing them for who they truly are, not who you hoped they could become. You start to notice how they avoid hard conversations, how they deflect responsibility, how they dismiss your feelings, or act inconsistently. You see the emotional immaturity, the lack of empathy, the control, the selfishness, or even just the simple fact that your values no longer align. But instead of trying to fix them, you feel a calm resignation. Not because you've stopped caring, but because you've stopped trying to rewrite someone's character just to make them easier to love. This kind of awareness doesn't come from judgment. It comes from growth. You no longer believe that love is about molding someone into who you need. You understand now that real love is about acceptance, but not the kind where you abandon your own needs. It's the kind where you say, "This is who they are, and I no longer have the desire or energy to force it to work." What used to trigger you now feels like confirmation. Their behavior no longer stings. It simply reinforces the truth you've been slowly learning. You deserve better. You no longer make excuses for them. You no longer feel hope in the places you used to feel hurt. You just observe. You accept. And you let go, not with anger, but with quiet understanding. This shift is one of the most powerful forms of healing. Because the moment you stop trying to change someone is the moment you truly reclaim your power. It means your love is evolving, from attachment to self-awareness, from illusion to truth. And in that truth, you begin to choose peace over potential. 9. You're more focused on your healing and self-growth. One of the clearest signs that you're emotionally detaching from someone you once deeply loved is the shift in focus, from them to yourself. where your thoughts and energy were once consumed by how to save the relationship, how to keep them close, how to make them see your worth. You now find yourself pouring that energy inward. You start asking different questions. What do I need to feel whole? What wounds do I need to heal? What version of myself have I neglected for the sake of love? Healing doesn't always look loud or dramatic. Sometimes it looks like setting small goals again, reading books that make you think, spending time with people who lift your spirit instead of drain it, getting lost in creative passions, reclaiming pieces of yourself that were once pushed aside to make room for someone else's chaos. And in this shift, you begin to feel something new: clarity, strength, direction. You may notice that you don't reach for your phone to check if they've texted. Instead, you reach for your journal, or your headphones, or your running shoes. You find yourself making space for solitude, not because you're lonely, but because solitude no longer scares you. It's where you're finding your rhythm again. Your emotions, once tangled around someone else's presence, are now being redirected toward your own restoration. This self-growth isn't about revenge or proving anything. It's about becoming who you were always meant to be, before the pain, before the confusion, before the constant emotional labor. You begin to build boundaries, not walls. You start to forgive, not to welcome them back, but to free yourself from the weight of resentment. And slowly, without even realizing it, you begin to glow differently. You speak with more certainty. You walk with more purpose. You realize that love shouldn't cost you your identity. And now, you're choosing yourself, not out of ego, but out of wisdom. Because in the end, healing is the quiet revolution where you stop waiting to be saved and instead start saving yourself. 10. You set boundaries without guilt or fear. One of the strongest signs of emotional detachment is when you begin to set boundaries without guilt, hesitation, or fear of losing the other person. In the past, you might have swallowed your discomfort just to keep them close. You may have let things slide, canceled your plans, said yes when you meant no, tolerated disrespect, or kept silent when something hurt because you were afraid of pushing them away. You were scared that standing up for yourself meant losing their love. But now, something has shifted. Your silence no longer feels like peace. It feels like self-betrayal. And your need for emotional safety has started to outweigh your fear of abandonment. So you start speaking up. You say, "That's not okay with me," or "I'm not available for that," or simply, "No," not with anger, not with drama, but with calm clarity. And more importantly, you don't second-guess yourself afterward. This kind of boundary setting comes from deep inner work. It shows that you're no longer depending on someone else's acceptance to feel worthy. You've begun to understand that love without respect is not love at all. And so, whether it's taking space, demanding honesty, or walking away from manipulation, you start protecting your peace like it's sacred, because now it is. You might be surprised by how people react when you begin enforcing these limits. Some may push back, test you, or guilt you, but that no longer scares you like it once did. Because the version of you who used to tolerate everything just to feel needed is gone. And in their place is someone who knows they deserve to feel safe in their connections. You set boundaries now not to control others, but to honor yourself. Not to punish anyone, but to prevent yourself from abandoning your needs again. You realize that love is not proven through sacrifice. It's proven through alignment, balance, and mutual respect. And perhaps most importantly, you no longer feel the need to explain yourself to be understood. Your boundaries are no longer up for debate. They are acts of self-respect, and you finally understand that protecting your heart isn't selfish. It's necessary. 11. You don't feel jealous or anxious about their life anymore. A clear and quiet sign of emotional detachment is when their life no longer triggers jealousy, anxiety, or emotional turbulence in you. You stop checking their social media to see who they are with, what they are doing, or how happy they look without you. You don't feel that sinking sensation in your stomach when you hear they're talking to someone new or moving on. Not because you stopped caring entirely, but because you've stopped tying your worth to their choices. In the past, their happiness without you might have felt like a threat. You may have compared yourself to everyone in their orbit, questioning what others had that you didn't. You may have stayed caught in a loop of overthinking, analyzing their posts, their silences, their patterns. But now, the grip is loosening. You're not trying to decode their actions anymore, because you're no longer holding on to the hope of being chosen. Your peace has started to matter more than your curiosity. You begin to understand that their life is no longer your responsibility, your competition, or your business. You stop assigning meaning to their moves. If they look happy, you let them be. If they seem distant, you let it go. You're no longer chasing clarity through their updates. You're finding it within yourself. This kind of release is powerful. It means your healing is becoming stronger than your attachment. You're not frozen by what they do or who they're with because you've started focusing on your own life. You realize now that love shouldn't come with insecurity or the constant fear of being replaced. And without that emotional chaos, you can finally breathe. You can finally rest. The freedom from jealousy isn't apathy, it's evolution. It's what happens when you begin to value your peace over your pain. When you accept that you cannot control another person's path, and that's okay. Because your worth isn't diminished by their choices, and your happiness is no longer defined by their presence or absence. It's becoming something you create every single day for yourself. 12. You start to feel free, rather than heartbroken, when they pull away. One of the final and most liberating signs of emotional detachment is when their distance no longer breaks you. It frees you. Where once their silence felt like punishment, their coldness like rejection, and their absence like a wound, now it feels like relief. You stop feeling abandoned when they pull away. Instead, you feel a quiet kind of freedom, as if a weight you didn't realize you were carrying has finally been lifted. It's not that you stopped caring overnight. You simply stopped clinging. You no longer view their presence as your lifeline. You've cried the tears, asked the questions, and tried to hold on for so long that now, their pulling away doesn't ignite panic. It confirms what you've already begun to accept. You're no longer fighting to keep something that was slowly breaking you. Their withdrawal no longer pulls you into emotional chaos. You don't rush to fix it. You don't beg for closeness. You don't twist yourself into versions you were never meant to be just to keep them near. You let them go, not because you've given up, but because you've finally come back to yourself. You've realized that love shouldn't feel like fear. That true connection doesn't require you to sacrifice your peace. This freedom is subtle, but powerful. You start to enjoy your own space more. You sleep better. You think clearer. You find yourself laughing without wondering if they'll notice. You start making decisions without factoring in how they might react. You begin to reclaim your time, your thoughts, your energy, and it doesn't feel like loneliness. It feels like coming home. And maybe that's the most powerful part of healing. When the person who once had the power to destroy your entire day walks away, and you don't shatter. You stand taller. You breathe deeper. You realize you've survived without them, and you'll keep surviving. Not with bitterness, but with quiet strength. Because when you stop breaking for someone else's distance, it means you've finally found closeness within yourself.